Everybody, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Michael Tronto, and I'm a strategic account specialist at Microsoft. I'm also joined today with Tad Haas, who leads as a senior account executive. Today, we will focus on streamlining your projects with project portfolio management for manufacturing. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a copy of the recording and the slide deck so you can review. The line will not be open for questions, but you can type in your questions via the chat feature. So if you want to know more about Microsoft and who we are today, we are a Microsoft joint venture that was founded in 2002. We provide consulting, business process outsourcing, managed services, and global support for staffing. We are a triple gold certified Microsoft partner. Less than 1% of all partners ever have that designation. We are certified in project portfolio management, collaboration and content, and cloud productivity. From a project and portfolio management standpoint, we have a deep expertise in Project Online and Project Server. So we have a lot of experience helping organizations maximize their efficiency and technological advantage. We have a footprint all over North America and internationally. I will now hand off the webcast to Tad Haas. Tad?
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those of you joining us from around the world. My name again is Tad Haas, and I am with Microsoft. I'm a specialist in this PPM solution set and have been working in the industry for over 20 years. My goal today is to talk a little bit about the possibilities and really, if you will, the art of the possible around streamlining your manufacturing projects with PPM. We'll go through today and focus on a number of key things using customer examples. We'll go through and talk about current trends, key challenges within the manufacturing enterprises, and ways to address those with the Microsoft and the Microsoft technology. I'd intended to go through and show an Aston Martin video today, which is up in YouTube, and I've got the link provided directly here. But I think the interwebs are not going to provide us enough fast introduction to what that is. But we'll give it a quick click and just give you an idea that Aston Martin is using project portfolio management, using the Microsoft technologies in a very active way, and are able to go through and use these tools much as we're talking to you about them. So I'll encourage you to take a look at this video when you get a chance later today or as you follow up on this actual webcast. The things that you'll take home from their video, of course, are the notions of how the tools help them bring product to market faster, securely. All right, with that, we'll pause and move on. By the way, as Mike had introduced, if there are questions, please put those in the question and answer panel that's provided for you through the WebEx user experience here. So let's talk about specifically manufacturing challenges. I'll tell you a little bit more about our company. We'll talk more about the software and the technology as we go through, but we need to get started with that. And I understand from the feedback you guys aren't seeing the desk, so let me share my desktop. That will certainly make this a slow go. Okay, hopefully you are now able to see our screen, and we'll head back for going from the content from there. So the introduction of our team, we went through that a little bit about the site. We talked a little bit about the Aston Martin use case and their video, and then we'll dive into the manufacturing challenges now. Sorry about the little delay there in the screenshots. So today in manufacturing, we are faced with the same challenges that we've always had about resource optimization, about accelerating time to market, about financial constraints and operational balances between plants and business goals, and resource optimization, whether they're machines or people. But today, the challenge is greater because the velocity is faster, the pace of business is faster. And organizations need to be making the digital transformations that support this new pace of change. Collaboration isn't a matter of sending an email and waiting for a response. It's a matter of interacting with someone on the plant floor, design contractor that you're using to build product with and for you. Everything needs to be happening in real time. And that's critical for manufacturing success. and addressing these type of challenges. Ultimately, accelerating time to market and driving your new products is what makes your organization, your company, the most money. And that's true whether it's low-tech manufacturing, whether it's large, discrete manufacturing, say for automobiles or trucks, or highly repetitive technology manufacturing, which goes on rapid runs, but then chip manufacturing will change overnight and there'll be new processes. You'll need to retrofit shop floors. Lots of activities will need to take place for your products and your projects to get delivered. We don't have time today to go through and talk about things like field service in manufacturing, really, or maintenance within your shop floors or the mobile work streams. But those are great conversations to have when you think about how PPM can tie into the broader value for manufacturing. For the trends that we talked about, of course, we mentioned digital transformation and acceleration of pace. Those go hand in hand. But today, of course, many organizations are moving to more agile or very lean processes. What have before been perhaps large gated methodologies, organizations are now trying to find ways to lean that out so that they can go through and connect systems and get value from the proper tools, leaving users to work with those things that work best for their particular role and their function, while giving executives and managers the ability to visualize data. We won't spend much time on it today really at all, but the AI and predictive analytics become quite important for us as we start to go through and look for coming trends, try to track project performance, resource spend, and perhaps equally important financial predictions. Where are we going with the finances, with the project, and so forth. In the conversation today, we'll talk about harnessing the power of the Microsoft Cloud, because it is Microsoft's platform, the leading public cloud, that gives us this foundation for accelerated project and portfolio management performance. The beauty of this cloud is that it is not only transforming in terms of work styles, the things we can accomplish, the speed at which we can do them, but it's an extremely secure platform. One that even the most conservative organizations are starting to drive towards. Because Microsoft is spending more on security than virtually any company in the globe. And so that's an important takeaway as you think about this. In our conversation today, as we think about this transformation, we'll be talking about project, of course, as we look at it as a PPM tool, but there's a much broader play on this as we look at all things Office 365. We look at the digital reporting and really the mobile transformation that Power BI can create, tying into the broader industry systems through Dynamics 365, the cloud through Azure, and all of the things that that means and includes. So as we talk about that today, and as we go through the demo, just keep in mind, these are tools delivered directly through the Microsoft Cloud. Now, of course, there are thousands and thousands of users and companies that work with Microsoft Project and the planning and the PPM tools today. Of course, our goal right now is to talk really about how manufacturing companies are doing this. And some might be, clothing manufacturers, others might be doing heavy industry with truck or manufacturing. Some are very high-tech oriented, and manufacturing, of course, is across industries. Sometimes even food and agribusiness is manufacturing in those kind of ways. So certain things to think about how the tools and the technologies are deployed. Of course, PPM is well known, well understood, and when we talk about manufacturing, we're not just talking about the discrete effort of that. We could be talking about the marketing departments inside a manufacturing organization, the IT departments, and so on. So we think not only in terms of the business and the industry, but the potential use case as well. So in today's webinar, we really want to go through and focus on 5 key areas. First, around innovation ideation. Second, on product and portfolio management. Third, resource management. Fourth, financial management. And then conclude with a couple of ideas and suggestions, real world examples from a Gartner presentation that talk about best practices. So these are the topics we'll go through and cover, interrupted by demonstrations between each of these key blocks. And then, of course, you can log on to our YouTube channel or wickersoft.com to find lots of additional supporting information as well. So let's get started on the details. Today, the idea of innovation and ideation is as important as anything, because whether it's directly inside of your own corporation or whether you get your best product ideas from your customers, from your partners, or other industry sources, you need to go through the process of reviewing those, of gating those, and ultimately acting on these things. And whether we are trying to improve the simple intake process, whether we're using simple or elaborate ranking and scoring to determine alignment and priority, how we're going through and tying these things into business drivers that the executives and the strategy are set for the company, and then ultimately how we deliver value through those projects. These are some of the core examples of things that we want to think about in the product and being able to address those. So let's take a look. If we come into our browser, and I'm now inside of the Edge browser, and you can see that I have an Office 365 window up in front of us. This happens to be part of the Wickersoft Kickstart and is a deployment for our project online. We can look at it in lots of different ways. This just happens to be one that we think works extremely well for organizations as they go through and want to get started rapidly. So the value Wickersoft brings to this through our Project Kickstart or 1 PPM is a quick dashboard that allows us to see where are my projects, what's the information for the risks and issues that I need to deal with. Tell me more about my project, my portfolios, and my programs, and taking a look at these quick health indicators right on a main entry screen. What these screens look like and how they're deployed inside of your organization, of course, may vary, but this is one quick, easy way to get started. Now today, we're really going to be telling the story of a particular user. And let me zoom in on that for a second, because the user we're going to talk about today is Daniel Williams. And Daniel has a role in the PMO as both a project manager, but also a PMO leader. So think of Daniel as a bit of a super user, and he'll have a role that allows us to span across different use cases today and things that we might want to do. Part of the value of the Office 365 platform is that it's super easy for me to go through and use the capabilities or things here like share or follow that allow me to simply set triggers to highlight things that I want to keep track of. And users are able to do this within the construct of your security to be able to go do these same kind of things. So you don't need to ask IT for access to systems. Being able to go through and use search anywhere is super important for us, and being able to go through and find the data that we need when we need it. Because we're in a browser, or because we can be accessing this data from a mobile device, we can get at this project information anywhere, anytime. Because Project Online is delivered as part of the Office 365 suite, we have as part of the goodness here, if you will, is the complete stack of tools that we're used to using. And in fact, right away, the software is smart enough to know that I've been working with a couple of different biothermal heating system that we're working on. It looks at notebooks or other documents or Excel worksheets or project plans or Word documents that might be your charter, for example. And all of those things are made available to us directly inside of the solution set. So this is an overview, and we can work with these things. We can call down a page that allows us to take different things about working with these in mobiles. Think of this as the taskbar that you work with in your Office products all of the time, and that's directly available to us in the browser just as it is on our desktop. But we said we'd start with ideas and innovation, so let's do exactly that. And I could either click on an idea or an issue or a risk here, or I could simply use a navigational panel on the left to go through and highlight the thing that I care about. In this case, we'll click on ideas. By doing that, the software then quickly opens up for us a list of ideas that are present in our intake system. And whether we use a simple or complex intake method, whether we have little rigor or lots of rigor around this is up to you. But in this case, you can see we have a list of ideas that are coming into the solution. We could go through and create a new idea and simply click on new to walk through the ideation process there. You might have lots of information that you track about a new idea. You could say, great stuff, and tell us why it's going to make a lot of money. Go through and start to define the different types of things. Is it a new product, for example? And this is helpful. It allows us to set templates and working documents that help support the process required. What priority, what kind of prioritization values are we going to put in there? We can put lots of information in, strategic alignment, high, medium, low, all the different types of things that we might care to do to talk about those items and include tracking of benefits along those functions. Because it's all part of the Office system, we're tying documents into it, and you get generally that look and feel as you saw before. But today's goal isn't to watch Daniel or me type through this scenario. Let's look at instead of our list here, and Daniel or others might be logged in and they might want to go through and do some voting on some of these different items. And this allows you to go through and say which ideas are strong, which ideas are weak. We can look at them across the enterprise and let folks make an opinion on it. Now, because Daniel's in the portfolio and he's going to start the process in a minute of gauging new work versus work in progress, he wants to go through and start doing some prioritization. So we'll click here on a quick request prioritization. It will give for us the possibility to go through and edit the grid. And just as we had been going through and changing some of the values before, we could reprioritize that this particular thing we're building or work we're doing will help us lower or raise costs. We can set or change priorities, all of the different things that help us understand, for example, what is good or bad about this particular project. And when we go through, as soon as I move away from that slide, you may have seen it right up front, is it actually went through and allowed us to change the priority. So it highlighted right in here and recalculated the prioritization of that particular work. So now we can see that we're doing this dramatically online real time. And it's a good way for us to do that. So now if we want to continue on, let's go through now and look at our next stages. Let's stop doing that. Let's go back to our non-drawing mode. And now we want to come back and take a look at what this does inside of our projects. We now have a look at the lists of the work and the portfolios and the things that we're doing in our area. I can pop back open my navigation panel and I can move back to what then is a notion of my projects and all of the things that I have in play. I might look at some that are here. I might want to go back and look at a list of projects, because once they go through a gated methodology, then they get dropped into our project center. And being dropped into our project center, this gives us the ability to go through now and see what are new projects that are being requested, what projects have been approved, and what work is current and in progress. This then lets me go through and see the things that I might want to do, some of the new ideas that are coming in, all of the documents and the content and things that belong with it, as well as grade that against projects and items that are work in progress. This is important for us in our ability to go through and understand what we have in flight and what we will be doing in the future. So let's take a quick step back on our slides so we can understand what might be next in our cycle through this demonstration today. We want to go through now and take a look at this spot where we're going through and talking about these. We've talked a little bit about voting and ranking. We've talked a little bit about applying some of the business drivers and the objectives, but we haven't gone through a whole cycle to work with that because our time is so limited today. What we'll do next, though, is start talking about the portfolio management side of things. How do we go through and work with our products? How do we go through then and build a more robust look at the things that we're working on, like the actual costs, the forecasted costs, the teams, looking at the schedules, walking through the control mechanisms in each of those ideas. Because one of the things that's important to take away from this is that as we go through and work with any particular project, we might want to go through and see where it's sitting in its workflow stages. How are we going through from the initial ideate stage to the planning stage to ultimately going through approvals? And that's the cycle we're in on this particular piece of work here. We can see that it's passed through the first initiation phase, it's gone through some approvals to launch, and now we're waiting to go through and do some portfolio analysis upon this, right? And this is part of the workflow that helps us understand how projects get through the gated methodologies. And whether it's a lean method or a robust gated methodology, an agile approach, of course, is all up to you. We can, of course, anytime we work with these items, take a deeper dive at looking at how items and information strategically impact the particular work that we're doing. So if we zoom in here a bit more on our ranking and scoring, we want to go through and see how these particular pieces of work will help us improve product quality. And that's important in your manufacturing world. Will these reduce defects by a certain amount? Will they greatly improve these things? How will a particular project or initiative help us expand into new markets? Or maybe we're in the middle of a market downturn and we need to go through and reduce costs. That's something that we would focus on here as well. So these are just some examples of how you configure and lay out Project Online to support your particular business processes. And we can go through the governance workflows, we can attach the documents with these items, we can see what the deliverables or the outcomes and the outputs of things are, and all of this is very important to us as we go through and plan our work, walk through stages, walk through ideations, and all the things that work with that for us. So let's talk about portfolios for a moment. When we talk about portfolios, sometimes they're very discrete groups of products, i.e. a new set of deliverables or a new set of products, whether it's a widget or a new family of cars. And other times it's a grouping of work that's in support of your products. And how you organize your portfolios, of course, is up to you. In our example, we can do this in a couple of different ways. For example, we might want to go through and look at them as a collection of work that we simply group by our business initiatives and prioritization. This is part of a Wickersoft configuration called One Portfolio, where we go through and let you align your projects directly within the particular portfolio constraint. Are we increasing innovation? Are we growing new markets? What are the things that we're doing with these portfolios? And then being able to understand, excuse me, what the value of these items are, what the cost returned on these items will be, and what our progress against these work items is. You can see we have red, green, and yellow traffic lighting available to us throughout. And that's true as we're working as we drill down into the details, as we start to look at a particular portfolio to understand the business cases behind it, where we might have a more elaborate intake process, where we're starting to use things like lean metrics. You know, what are we using for feature cycles or defects and the different types of numbers? We always, of course, want to understand the initiatives that are tied to a particular portfolio, and this is a great way to go through and look at those. And this is a simple way of tracking and gauging against this work. You might notice that it looks and feels a lot like SharePoint because indeed that's what we're doing. We're leveraging Office 365 and all things SharePoint to go through and do these exact pieces of work. For example, I can use the alert me's, I can work with the workflows, I have all of the functionality that's supported with that. Let's go ahead then and step back and talk about the notion of actually walking your portfolio through identifying risks, tracking, analyzing the costs, and working our way through a portfolio intake. So Daniel's gone through, he's looked at all of the projects, they now know what they have in their hopper, the project list of things that we're working on or ideas that we have exists, but he now needs to make some trade-offs between projects that are being requested, projects that have been approved but not yet started, or work in progress, or WIP. As you can see below, we have lots of traffic lighting on the things that we're actually spending time, effort, and money on. As we come into a new planning cycle, we need to be able to go through and analyze what can we do with the money and the people that we have. So let's look at that now. Most of your organizations today have someone in a strategic office, whether it's the PMO or someone that works for the operations executives or even CEO level stuff, and does strategic planning. They will go through and use Excel spreadsheets to do this, and of course that's what this is going to look a lot like for you. You'll notice things like export to Excel are dramatically found here, directly found here. But this allows us to go through and play trade-off analysis without impacting your project plans directly until you decide it's time to do that. So in our portfolio example here, I have in theory a $10 million budget, and for that budget, we can see through the product that it has helped us analyze work that we can do and work that we cannot do based off our budget. Now, when it does that, of course, it takes into account the relative priority and the scores that have been calculated for this work. And this helps us understand that some projects get ranked and scored higher than others. And that when we do this, through the process known as Pairwise Comparison, Project Online helps us understand the most important to the least important project. And it does this again through the notion of a pairwise comparison, where we evaluate whether one thing is more important, less important, a bigger influence or less of an influence, and allows us to go through here and set those triggers which will impact what the priority score is in terms of who which projects get the highest ranking, and then ultimately which we can do for the money that we have. Some organizations are mature and are doing this today every, quarterly, monthly. Some do it once a year, and some have very elaborate driver schemes behind it and others don't. So this will depend on your organization's maturity. At the end of the day, however, the value in this is that by simply going through and saying, well, with $10 million, I can do all of these projects, but with $5 million, for example, my portfolio will change and various projects will get moved or moved out because I do or do not have the money to address those. And what's super critical here as well is to say, well, it's great that you have all of the money, but what about the resources? You may have to go back and say, well, yeah, that's great. I have the dollars to do it, but do I have the people? And when I take a quick glance at this scenario here, by pivoting over to my resources, I can look at the assignments around this, and you'll start to see that I can do a group of projects, again, based off my dollars and my resources, but I can't do them all because I simply don't have enough people to do the work. These are the projects that are not selected. By taking a deeper dive, I can then go through and see, well, what happens now that I've adjusted my finances? What can I do on the resource side to improve my scenario? Well, you might notice directly right away that there are red highlights here, and that when we look at the projects that are not selected, we can see directly from an FTE perspective, I might not have the right type of engineer. I might not have the right contractor or shop floor resource or someone to go through and do this work for me internally or externally. The power of the tool, of course, is that we might want to be able to go through and say, well, what happens if we hire more resources? Can we do more work then? And so through Project Online, through the PPM tool and portfolio analytics, we can indeed go back and say, let's take a look at this. We could shift things in time, of course, or we can play some games and say, let's assume we have enough money to go through and make a higher choice here. Let's go ahead and recalculate and see what happens then. And by making a recalculation at this point, we will see that we've been able to move in some projects. In fact, we've moved in 3 of the projects on our portfolio because the system knows that we can now go through and hire some resources to do that. And because the system is automated, because it's tied together, it knows which resources, it knows what the cost of those resources are, and it will give for you then a report that says you need these kind of resources during these time windows for that cost. This is a super powerful capability from Project Online and helps manufacturing companies do trade-off analysis between projects that they're currently doing, projects that they might be wanting to do that are higher value. And as your markets change, you need to bring in a new window, you need to build a new kind of structure, or you need to provide a new type of vehicle in your manufacturing. This allows you to make trade-offs between work that is requested, work in progress, and decide what's most important for you. All again through the Office 365 platform. That's part of the whole package here with SharePoint and the rest of the things that come with that. Tracking and progressing, of course, is a big piece of that. And we want to know at any moment, what does this look like for us relative to reporting and visibility? So let's talk about that. We've looked a little bit at some of the details, but we really might want to start with the end in mind. And in this case, starting to look at, what are the things that are taking place for my projects? What are the status of these? Give me some of the reports and the KPIs, because you have end users that are working on the details, and then you have executives that just care about the outputs of this. It's important to know that as we go through the effort of using the tool, it's these types of reports that allow us really to focus in on, how aligned are our requests, what type of work is what type of new products are being requested, and all the things that go along with that. So we have a ton of functionality that lets us go through and see those kind of scenarios. And whether we're drilling in on them, drilling down, or working through, these are the kind of scenarios that let us look at and understand more detail. What's really cool on this is that when you start to get the information all put together in one place, you can use very elaborate graphics to help us understand what projects are helping us drill into improving customer satisfaction or increasing market share and innovation. See those projects come through our pipeline, understand what the budget and the impact of those items is, and then ultimately see where they're getting delivered through our windows, how we're doing in our score, where's our actual costs and our budgets and the things that get associated with that. All right, this starts to tie all of these things in. What we're looking at, in case you're not familiar with this, is Power BI. And there's a tremendous amount of flexibility within Power BI to really reflect and tailor views that are important for your executives, whether they're looking at online through a browser like we are today, or they want to switch over to a mobile view, for example, and try to look at things as how they would be delivered on their phone. So now I can see if I'm an executive out in the real world and I'm traveling, and I still want to be able to go through and look at and drill down and work with and interact with these particular items as I can. If I care about these, I can click through and see the details. So that's part of the power of the Office 365 platform for this type of project and portfolio management. Let's take another look now at this notion of resources, because it's important that we think about our teams and what our folks are doing, how they're being allocated to work. I showed it at an executive level just a moment ago, how we consider that in the portfolio assessment, but let's look a little bit closer as we go through and build out the details of a particular working item. A couple of things on projects. When you go through the process of building them, we can come through here in New, and as we zoom in a little bit on the page, you'll see that we can come in and pick a template or work type. And in this regard, we're going through and saying, well, let's do a new product development. And when we create that type of project, we can simply go through, click that. It will walk us through the process of any workflows, approval stages that you want, and create those for us. Once they're delivered, or once they're put into the hopper, for example, on this particular project, let's say we're doing a deployment, we would go through and look at the details of this particular project plan. And in this case, we could go through and deal with the permissions, or we could build a team that's going to work with this individual project. And here we're going to go through and do that. Now on this project, it's actually already been done, but what you see here is on the left is a list of all of our different types of project managers, our QA managers, folks that are in support roles, and all of the different things that we are doing there. And we can assign generic resources to a list, or we can go through and assign named individuals. So I might want Grace Williams to be part of this. I've already selected QA, but let's say that I need a business analyst also to participate in this project. So I can go through and grab those, simply click add, and now they've been put here as part of the team of resources that are being earmarked for this project. We haven't allocated them yet. That's a next step that we take either at the high level through a resource request and approval cycle, or through allocating them through individual tasks on Microsoft Project. Many of you have done that over the years, so you know exactly how that's done. But this step in building the team helps us identify, who we want. And if we decide Grace isn't the right one on the project, we can remove Grace at any time. We can take our business analyst people off this list and just go with the original commitment, or make those changes interactively. The value of doing that, of course, is it allows us to understand all up where our resources are. And we can get tons of detail about that as we look at the resource pool here maintained within the system, can be fed from your other tools, or we can go through here and work directly in it and see how am I doing from a heat map point of view on my mission critical resources. Well, I can see Amy's overloaded directly because of all of the red. That's also true for other people and certain skill sets within my view. If you'd rather pivot on this and look at it as a utilization and see that overall, of course, we're looking pretty good there en masse, but not for those particular individuals. This is part of the resource management functionality that's built directly into the Microsoft tools. We can think about once a resource has been made to a team, or when we're actually going out and looking for resource types, we can also use the resource request function that lets us go through and understand what resources we might need. And you can see I have a spreadsheet, probably how many of your organizations are doing it today. I can go through and create a new engagement which says I think I need somebody, but I'm not exactly sure yet. But let me go ahead and say this is the person, or I need an operations engineer, I need a person, let's say I need Erwin, and what project do I need them for? I can pick a project, and then I can go through and say a request, the dates, and all the particulars that go along with that. And by doing that, it then gets routed to Erwin's manager. Erwin's manager would come in, log into the system and say, all right, what are the requests for the people that that belong to me? And should I use Lisa, or should I use one of her contemporaries? Someone else in the team might be able to make that. And this drills things down into a very detailed level of resource assignment, both from a requesting perspective and an assignment by the individual resource manager. And that can be useful in departments like IT or marketing. It can also be useful in engineering because you're really drilling down on specific skill sets for particular design or QA test type activities. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the areas that are for the Q&A session, and Mike and the team will let me know if there's anything going through. I haven't seen one come through yet, but we'll keep our eyes peeled. So that's a little bit about the resource management piece of it. Let's drill down into the last piece of the detail for financial management, and we'll cover a little bit more here with reporting and views that go along with this, and then wrap up with some additional insights today around how PPM can accelerate the performance of your manufacturing company with the Microsoft toolset and Microsoft's help. When we look at financial management, it's much like resources, of course. We need to establish a budget. We need to build that budget against work. We need the input of actuals. We need the ability to go through and analyze how we're doing, and then adjust the portfolio and the spend as necessary. This we do interactively through the tool, and we do it through the reporting side of things. So let's talk about this with the end in mind again as we go through and start to look at reports, and as we go through and look at the type of insights that we might want to be taking into account here for our projects. And if we come into our insights and we start to drill down again into the details for financial management, for example, we can come in and take a look at our financials directly. And in this case, by simply clicking in on that area, we'll drill into more details. Now, this is a visual way of looking at where we're doing all of our spend, how much we're doing over time, and what these individual costs are at the portfolio level, all the way across the particular project, what's our trend in these items, and then looking at actuals versus other items as well. What's useful here is that with the tool, we can go through and interactively select on which of the portfolio items we want to work with. If we're just concerned about product innovation because we're the portfolio manager inside of our new product company, we'll drill into that area and see exactly how we're spending our money over time on these budgets. So you'll see that they're very interactive, and the way I go through and select and filter these as an individual item discretely or as the portfolio all up. Of course, tracking actuals versus planned is super important, and sometimes this data is manually keyed into the tool in a spreadsheet like you're used to doing, or you're getting the data from another ERP system like SAP or Oracle Financials. Being able to integrate to these and have that information pulled together is quite important. Ultimately, the importance of this is to start looking at trending and performance. How are we doing across our work? One of the things that we talked about early on as coming trends is this notion of machine learning. How can we go through and work with different types of examples that show us, here's what our spend has been so far, here's what we anticipate it's going to be over time. And the gray window here actually gives us a band within a confidence factor that we've put in place to show us what we think we're going to be spending over time. There's our $10 million budget. You can see that we've got that highlighted here on the screen. Or we could go through, is it the outer limit or the, in a perfect world, we're spending this much money. What we're currently thinking just at a flat line here, but realistically, if we're pessimistic, we're more likely to spend up on the top part of the line. This is what we mean by projections. It's using the machine learning and the data that's provided for us through the tool as it takes track of actuals versus forecast and give us those insights. Pretty powerful stuff. Other examples of this are when we start to look at drilling down into the projects and drilling into detail around resource capacity and information. Actually, let's go through and start a new window here so we don't have to look at the big mess. Let's see. Let me erase all the drawings there. And this shows yet more ways in which we can start to look at our financial information, our project data, the risks and the issues that we've talked about. Because remember, visibility is the key thing. The reasons businesses endeavor to put tools in place is so you can make better decisions. And you are making better decisions when you have the information at hand. Power BI and the Office 365 platform gives us those views. And whether we're looking at tailored types of views, whether we're looking at out-of-the-box kind of scenarios across our resources, or various value-adding scenarios that Wickersoft has put together for these kind of projections, there's lots of choice for you as an end-user community. We talked about adjusting the portfolio when we went through and looked at that based off our financial use case around budget, 10 million versus 5 million, for example. So now you've seen the high level of what we can do to go through and track actual cost, operational cost, budget cost, CapEx versus OpEx, etc. So the last thing we wanted to spend a little bit of time on before we wrap today is talking about some of the roadblocks. This content directly is coming from a Gartner presentation this past summer where one of Microsoft's customers and someone I get the pleasure of working with directly goes through and talks about how they use their transformational roadblocks or how they dealt with them. Some of the manufacturing companies today are very waterfall centric and have a need to move towards more agile work streams. These are pretty important things that we want to think about as we go through and get a chance to improve our processes. So, think about lean, think about agile and all the things that we go through and do that. What are the processes your organization has today? Are they burdensome or do they not exist? Somewhere between there is the happy medium. Organizations today have too many disconnected products, and so working with Office 365 and tying all of this together is a great way to address that. Things like SharePoint are really good at helping people get the tribal knowledge about your new product development process and get it into tools so that it can be shared and best practices captured. Because now reports are so powerful, being able to go through and sort of impress upon gatekeepers or monuments, people that aren't very good at change, giving them the type of visibility that they need are some of the things that you'll want to consider as you go through these transformations towards an automated process. And of course, project manager attrition, project management training. Some companies are very good at this, others are striving to go through and put in place best practices for these things. So each organization, you'll need to go through all of the things that you think about in that. In this particular case, the strategies used to overcome those obstacles were things like process documentation, working and putting in place better templates and defining exactly what the deliverables are, getting rid of the confusion and the ambiguity about what your governance cycle is. What process does a project actually have to go through to get approved and funding exist? This is pretty important stuff. I talked about SharePoint being one of the key enhancements for that. How do you go through then and use the views around sharing information? How do we go through and look at our SharePoint project sites? How do we go through and look at all of our projects as we go through and manage work so that we can collaborate on these things? And when we think about this, it's pretty important because when we look at a project and we drill down into it, or when we look at our PMO, how do we share and collaborate information across the project site, across the portfolio? Well, in Office 365, we get to take advantage of all things SharePoint. We get to take advantage of the fact that documents are integrated, that I've got real-time presence for other people. I can have threaded conversations. I can integrate with Skype and all the things that go along with that. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility and power that comes from those things. And of course, taking a look at scorecards and dashboards, what are the things that are the most important reports? How do we get that surfaced to the key parties? And then thinking about developing our resources and whether you're tracking actual time, whether you're going through and getting, putting in place a PMO that is there to support, whether you identify departmental versus project work. This is a pretty important one. And in this particular use case, it was very important. How much of the team's work is project versus how much is other? And that other might be team meetings, administrative stuff, non-value adding engineering or things that are not related to the engineering or the new product introduction that you're so focused on. Things to think about. So as we wrap up here, let me just focus on 5 key benefits, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about Wickersoft and how we can help. As we think about project and portfolio management for manufacturing, these are some key takeaways. If you deploy the tools and if you have the organizational best practices in place, you will improve your time to market. You will be able to communicate to your teams and all stakeholders in a faster way. They'll all be able to find the information that they need online, real time. And whether that's looking through the browser as we've been demonstrating today, or doing it through your mobile devices, communication is paramount and is an outcome of putting these types of tools in place. We didn't have enough time to spend on real resource efficiencies, but understand that the tool gives you the ability to manage people, equipment, cost resources, and virtually any other type of things that you want to track on that resource side. We definitely did spend some time talking about working on the right stuff so that we know which projects to do a little bit of trade-off analysis on, from new project ideas to work in progress and being able to make some trade-offs on those. We didn't have enough time to go in and talk about each of the different planning methods today, but whether you're dealing in a lean, safe world, a traditional waterfall, or moving towards agile, all of these kind of methodologies are supported through the Microsoft Office 365 and Project Online platforms. To that end, Forrester did a review, Microsoft provided some of the slides on this content. It's an eyesore today, but when you get the deck, you'll be able to pull some of the value statements that tell us why you should want to go through and do this. That reducing your project budget by 5% can occur by putting these project and portfolio management software tools in place and processes. So something to think about and take away. We haven't talked a lot about Wickersoft, but to wrap up today, I'll do just that with a couple of quick slides. I work for a company called Wickersoft, and we are a joint venture that was started with Microsoft back in 2002. Microsoft continues to have an ownership footprint with our company, and we are a global enterprise with over 6,500 employees. Our focus, of course, is on our customers and the value that the Microsoft platform brings to that community. Specifically, we help organizations through a set of business applications like what we've just been talking about here today around PPM. We assist customers with the consulting services that deliver both the tools and the transformations required. And of course, educational and training are things that are important to that in terms of ultimate success, and even expand out into supporting staffing services or managed services such as PMO as a service if you're looking to go down those paths. What we do, of course, is built on top of the Microsoft stack. And today we've demonstrated and looked at the things that are project, we've looked at the things that are SharePoint, and we've looked at the things that are Power BI. And of course, Office 365 all up. But notice we can help you with things in around agile project and portfolio management, professional services automation, field service, and in fact, this is a great area for field service and manufacturing. So look for future webcasts and information on those type of briefings. As a triple gold certified partner, we're able to address a whole plethora of mix as Mike talked about up front. And then of course, we are set to support you in many different ways that helps you with the implementation services, the education, the ongoing support and advisory. With that, we'll begin to wrap up. I'll look again to see if we have any additional questions, but there are specific resources that you'll find linked into the session today that will give you a link to the video that we started with the Aston Martin use case, a little bit of a use story around their particular manufacturing experience, our YouTube channel, and some of the things that are important there as well. So you will be able to see quite a bit as you look deeper into those sessions. With that, I want to thank you for your time and your attendance today. We really appreciate your participation. Feel free to follow up directly through our team at nasales@wickersoft.com. Reach out to me directly through LinkedIn. And with that, I'll say thank you very much and wrap up today's session.